I have such a great relationship with this club. I'm really excited to be back here again. So where did I get the idea for this? What's going on? Okay, we'll do it that way. How did I ever get the idea of doing this presentation? Well, it started when I would mention photographers like Edward Weston at workshops or even some camera club meetings, and I get all these blank looks, like people really don't know who these people are. And so I started writing blog posts. Well, I started writing at the beginning of photography back in the mid 1800s and how it progressed. Um, and these are examples of some of the photographers that we're going to be looking at, as the photographers we'll be looking at tonight, the examples of their work. But so I started writing blog posts. I've got a whole series of blog posts on my website, one for each of the photographers we have in the presentation tonight. But also, I also have Cartier-Bresson there too, who surprised the heck out of me. But so if you want to see more, get into more detail, I've got, what, 12, 15 articles on my blog post about this. Okay. In the beginning 1800s, everything was just fine. We had painters. They were going around painting portraits. They're having a good business. They were making a good living in the early 1800s and before that. They even had this practice of making these miniature portraits, just like 1.5 inches, 2 inches. That was very popular. Actually, that had been popular for centuries. But then the business kind of got turned on its head in 1839 when Charles Daguerre invented the daguerreotype. Now, daguerreotype is a copper plate that's coated on one side with silver. It's made light sensitive by exposing it to iodine vapor, and then you can take photographs and process them. And he worked out this whole process where you could take portraits, and instead of having to sit for who knows how long in front of a painter and wait who knows how long for them to deliver the final product, you could either get the product that same day or the next day. And it was so popular that millions of daguerreotypes were taken in the very short years that it was in vogue. You can imagine how the painters felt about that. They're taking our business. And so the daguerreotype, here's some examples of portrait daguerreotypes that were available to you. And like I said, you could have that back either the same day or the next day. Well, the painters took up arms and they said, you can't encroach on our business like that. It's not proper. And so here's a daguerreotype, which by the way, it was a camera obscura. It doesn't even have a shutter. The daguerreotype, the camera, the painters pointed out that it was a mechanical device. And how could you possibly create art with a mechanical device? Only humans can create art, and preferably humans with brushes and paint and stuff like that. So that was their argument that would try to dissuade people from, well, you don't want a portrait by a daguerreotype, you want art. Well, then there's a group of photographers in Europe that took issue with that and said, you know what? We can make art with a camera, and we'll just show you we can do that. Now, I want to give you a lot of things were happening from 1839 on. 1839, the daguerreotype came along. And then in 1851, Archer developed a wet plate. Now, the wet plate is a plate of glass that has a coat of collodion put on it. The glass plate is put in a camera. You take the picture of the subject, you come back into the darkroom, and you develop the image, the negative image, before the collodion dries out. That's why it's called a wet plate. Not very comfortable for someone like Edward Curtis, who's out in Nebraska photographing the last of the American Indians with wet plates. He had to pull his darkroom with him. But that was a big game changer and kind of retired the daguerreotype, although I'm sure people were still doing it. I love to get it. Wish I had a sample of one. And then Dr. Richard Maddox, 20 years later, came up with the dry plate. And now you could go to the camera store and you could buy a box of dry plates, and you didn't have to worry about taking your darkroom with you out into the wilderness. But at this point, this is a world for passionate photographers who actually knowing chemistry during that period of time was an incredibly important skill. And but a fellow by the name of George Eastman turned everything on its ear when in 1888 he developed film and the Kodak One camera. The Kodak One camera cost $25. It came with a roll of film in it that would take 100 pictures. When you've used your 100 pictures, you just send it back to Mr. Eastman back in New York, and he would develop the film for you, make prints for you, put another roll of film for you, and send it back to you for $25. But this really put photography in everyone's hands, at least anyone that had $25 back there. But the question was still, can photography be art? And the first approach was, well, look at, if we make photographs that look like paintings, they'd have to say that they are art. And so that was the first approach. But that lasted from, let's say, 1850 to a little after 1900, when they said, hold on a second, we're imitating painters. We're using cameras and the development techniques, the processing techniques to imitate painters. If photography is going to be considered an art, it has to be done on its own strengths and weaknesses. It can't be imitating other media. So it wasn't until 1832 that photography was formally recognized as an art form, and that was when the New York Museum of Modern Art mounted its first exhibition of photographs. So it was from 1850 to 1932, the battle raged to get photography recognized as art. Now, in that period of time is Henry Peach Robinson. He was born in the United Kingdom, did some fabulous photography himself, but I'm just confining this presentation to photographs that are taken by photographers living in America. He never did it. But the reason I put him in here is we created this book called Pictorial Effects in Photography. And in it, he's using this idea that we can make photography art by imitating paintings. And this is an absolutely fascinating book to read. If you're at all curious, I'd recommend it. It's even available still in Amazon. But the title, Pictorial Effects in Photography, the word pictorial came to be associated with this movement of making photographs that look like paintings. That became pictorialism, or the pictorialist method. So pictorialism was really dominant in painting and in photography for a good 40 years. So I want to introduce the characters. I don't know, don't think a lot of people are that familiar with pictorialism, but there's a whole lot of darkroom manipulation. Do you manipulate your photographs? Yeah, sure, I'm a pictorialist. Filters used to soft focus is kind of yeah. Self-focus was kind of a hallmark of pictorialist photographs. Um, Treating the negative when you're developing it, using bichromate, which imparts color to the prints, using special papers like platinum. But I think the real heart of pictorialism, and that carries through to today, is to capture imagination and interpretation rather than just taking what comes out of the camera. I like those two words, imagination and interpretation. I also like the words in the final bullet, aesthetic and poetic. And that's still a driving force in the photography we do today. That's driving force in the landscape photography I attempt to do. So here are a few examples of pictorialism. This is Robinson's most famous painting. It's actually 5 negatives that are combined together into one print. And it's got a very common subject matter, some sort of heartrending subject for the printing. Now here's another one from 1866, and what an intense look, the soft focus, the soft contrast, and the color, the color, all part of the color pictorialism. A landscape photographer. This has an interesting story. It was Davison didn't publish it right away. Then he finally put it in a gallery, I think it was. And one of the magazines, Amateur Photographer, which was not for amateurs at all, it was, they hated it. And a magazine and a newspaper, Times, loved it. So this was very controversial. Makes it kind of interesting. Here's one of Alfred Stieglitz's photographs that he took during his pictorial period. And I won't go into all of them, but just kind of get a feel for what they are. Here's Day, who started a project to document the life of Jesus Christ with photographs, and these are the 7 last words from the cross. Here is Clarence H. White, who we'll talk about, and one of his photographs. Kind of the young girls playing this game. It's kind of sweet. Gertrude Casebar, we're going to talk about her. She was very energetic in promoting women and particularly motherhood. And this is one of her most famous photographs to motherhood. And then this one has bichromate. It's on the finished print, and Damochet used something to scratch the bichromate to create that pattern, that scratch pattern. This was Edward Steichen's The Pond, and we'll have a lot to say about that in a little bit, but the blue color comes from bichromate. And here's kind of a unusual one in that most of the photographs at the end, you were looking at the subject's face, and here it's like you snake up on this person and take a picture of her looking over the wall, the retaining wall there to the street below. And then this one is actually made in the Eastern Sierra. Brigman, who is the model there, is giving a soul coming out of the pine and heading into the heavens. So you can get a little bit of an idea of what pictorialism is like. Well, so let's introduce the cast for tonight. We already talked about Robinson. Now I want to talk about Gertrude Casebar, Midwest gal, and was often described as the best photographer of the time. Really did some beautiful stuff. Alfred Stieglitz is the next one, and he was the person to go to if you wanted to be accepted as a photographer. He was the most influential of them all in making photography recognized as a fine art. Clarence H. White, he was a self-taught photographer, but I think he's most known, and the biggest contribution was his school of photography that he created up in New England. And then there's Edward Steichen. Edward Steichen, oh my gosh. What didn't he do? So I'm not going to get into a whole lot of details now because this guy just did everything. Then the next is Paul Strand. And Paul Strand had a really strong social conscience and expressed that in the subjects that he photographed down in the, shall we say, less affluent parts of New York. He also got into cinematography. We'll have more to say about him. Imogene Cunningham, I tell you, I just absolutely fell in love with her. Ansel Adams described her as having veins full of acetic acid. And you can see that in her expression here. She did the most amazing photographs. You'll probably hear me take on a whole new tone of voice when we talk about her. Dorothea Lange also, boy, I got a soft spot for her. She had polio when she was 7 and went around with a limp, photographing the Depression, the Dust Bowl, the effects of that, the incarceration of Japanese American during World War II. And I love this photograph of her. She has a great little tripod there, doesn't she? And then there's Edward Weston, the photographer I would mention that triggered this whole thing. One of the things that he evolved into was, and we'll see a couple of examples, photographing single things at a time to pull out their quintessence. He also talked about, mentioned that form follows function. And he has a day book, which is, what's left of it is published by Aperture. And it is an incredible read. I recommend that. And then 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count for the last one. Yep. Our buddy Ansel Adams, who loved the piano, and he would have just as well become a concert pianist as he was a master landscape photography. So that's our group. Now, what we're going to do is go through this one decade at a time, and we're going to start with 1890. On the East Coast, we have Casebeyer, Steiglitz, White, and Steichen that are contributing. Casebeyer attended the Pratt Institute, which was the leading institute for learning about art. So she got off to a really good start. She was also big on studying the chemistry of photography, being a pictorialist. Steiglitz, he was in Germany. His father took his family to Germany where they could get a proper education and then brought him back to New York. There were 2 camera clubs in New York. Steiglitz joined them both. At some point negotiated the merging of the 2 into the Camera Club of New York, and they had a publication called Photo Notes, and he was the editor of that. White was still doing pictorialist photography, mostly self-taught. Steichen started out painting. He was taking courses on painting and did a lot of painting. So let's take a look at Casebeyer. Casebeyer, when she was a kid, her dad took the family to Colorado where there was a gold rush going on. He wanted to provide lumber to, not look for gold, but provide lumber. As a result, Casebeyer had a lot of childhood friends that were Native Americans. And when the Wild West show, Wild Bill Cody's Wild West show came to New York, she went to Bill Cody and said, "Hey, can I photograph some of your Indians cast members?" And he said, "Sure." The point I want to bring out about this portrait, look how intense it is, and you just get a real sense of who this person is, and this is a real consistent thing that you're going to see in the portraits from these masters. I don't know if I should make my comments about PPA and the portraits you see in their stuff. Well, I'll just let you know that there's something there that's not as favorable as what we're going to see here. Okay, we're back to Blessed Art Thou Among Women. And the mother, she's got this supportive, careful looking pose. The little girl, she's standing rigid like she's off to school or off to work. But there's one more thing that's again stresses the importance of motherhood in the photograph. behind the mother's head is actually a painting of the Annunciation in the Bible. Um, so everything ties together. As far as Stieglitz concerned, this is really a fun photograph. And of course, it's got the tinting and the focus and all that stuff of pictorialism. But there's this little girl that's telling jokes to this group of kids. And there are two of them that are looking at Stieglitz. So I just find this really, really pleasing. Really a wonderful moment. White does this triptych of spring, and he's got a lovely female model in it, but it's really not about her. It's really about the feeling of spring, and she contributes to that as well as the blossoms on the trees. So White goes in for creating a feeling. In the West Coast, nothing's going on. So we get up to 1900, and we lose Robinson early in the 1900s. But now Paul Strand joins the New York group. Stieglitz gets really up. He has enough of the New York Camera Club and goes off on his own, creating the photo secession group. And that's what it meant, rebelling against the traditional ways of doing photography. And he invited Casebier, White, and Steichen to join him. Strand is a generation younger than all these guys, so he didn't get invited at that time. But that was, and then that group created a journal called Camera Raw, and he, of course, was the editor. You could say dictator, that would be fine. Of Camera Raw, and boy, wouldn't you like to get your hands on a copy of that now? White was invited to lecture at Columbia University on photography, and let's see, Steichen, he's off doing everything now. He does the pond photograph. He gets involved with Rodin over in France to help him with one of his sculptures. And Strand, this is good. Strand, like I said, is a generation younger. He's in high school, and he joins the camera club in high school. And one of the field trips is to the little gallery of the photo secessions that Stieglitz was able to set up with Steichen's help. They did a field trip to that, and when Strand walked in there and saw those photographs, he says, "This is what I'm going to do with my life." So Stieglitz influences Strand. We'll come up to a situation where that gets reversed. Okay, so Casebier's works. I love to compare these two folks. Evelyn Nesbit, she was a chorus line girl, wanted to be an actress. She had two boyfriends. She looks like a tart, doesn't she? She had two boyfriends. She married one, and that one she married shot the other one. That's the kind of company. But the Henri one, who looks like Rembrandt, doesn't it? What a different processes and different ways of seeing it. This is Stieglitz's most famous photograph, called The Steerage. He was just getting ready to cruise to Europe. And he saw this, he runs back to his cabin, grabs his camera, and comes out and shoots it. And there's so much going on in this, but I think one of the lessons here is you've got the upper class and the steerage class of people. And that really shows the difference in their accommodations and their social status and all that stuff. As for White, we have another mood photograph, and this one is about an orchard. He's got the three women there picking fruit from the orchard. But this next one is really interesting because White and Stieglitz were sitting in a cafe, and they ended up talking with some painters. And the painters are saying, "You can't create art with cameras. That's not possible." So Stieglitz and White actually worked together on these nudes. And I would have loved to have been able to be at that cafe when they brought the those nude photographs to show to the painters. I think I would have loved to have heard that, what went on there. This is Steichen's The Pond. And like I said, it was colored with gum bichromate. It's in the pictorialist tradition. And the thing about this is MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, MoMA had one copy and they bought a collection from some rich collector, and he had a copy. There were only 3 prints in existence. And MoMA now had 2 of them. So in 2006, they decided, well, we're going to auction off one of ours. The print went for $2,800,000. It was the most ever paid for a print up to that point. Now Steichen had a relationship with Rodin, and this is his statue of Balzac. Well, that was very confidential because Rodin had been commissioned by a group of wealthy people to make the statue, and when they saw this replica of it, this model of it, they said, "No, we're not going to pay for it. That does not meet with our standards." It was way out there. Steichen saw a news article about it when he was in America, and he said, "You know, I'm going to have to go over to France and I think he and Rodin were friends already by then." And he went over to there, met with Rodin, and Rodin said, "Would you photograph it for me?" And he said, "Of course." And Rodin said, "Would you photograph it by moonlight?" And he said, "Of course." And the result is what you see here. And Rodin's comment was, "You will make the world understand my Balzac through your pictures." I think Rodin was pleased. So anyway, on the West Coast, we got a little bit going on. Dorothea Lange, she contracts polio when she's 7, which renders her limping her whole life. Interesting feature. Cunningham did some work for Edward Curtis, who did all the wet plate photographs of Native Americans in Kansas and Nebraska and all through there. Let's see. So Lang has polio. Weston moves follows his sister to California. They live in the Burbank area. But then he decides, you know, I want to be a good photographer. I better take some photography classes. So he enrolls in Illinois College of Photography for a 12-month program, which he then finishes in six months. And so when he goes to settle up with them, he says, "Well, I'll give you half the tuition since I've only been here 6 months." And they said, "No, you're going to give us the full tuition." And he said, "No, I don't need your stinking diploma." So anyway, he got his education. It's in 1906, there was the San Francisco earthquake, and Adams was living in the San Francisco earthquake with his father. He was just a kid. And after the initial shock, his father took all the kids, all the family out into the backyard, just because the aftershocks can be dangerous too. And one of the aftershocks came along and knocked Adams off his feet, and he broke his nose. And it was something that he planned to get fixed throughout his entire life, but never did. Cunningham's works, oh, look at how happy this is. Again, beautiful pictorialist work, and a couple of kids just fascinated with a bird. And there's a cat down at the boy's foot, just so joyful. And then she spent some time in Dresden studying the chemistry of photography. In fact, she actually published a couple of publications, technical publications on it. Amazing woman. Now we're in the Thames, and we have the same 5. Stieglitz, not that he cared. He couldn't hold on to friends, or friends abandoned him. And Stieglitz didn't care. What he was doing was the right, and everything else was wrong. So Casebeyer and White founded co-founded the Pictorialist Photographers of America organization, and it is still there. Stieglitz meets Georgia O'Keeffe, and the two of them, Stieglitz is married, so what? He meets Georgia O'Keeffe, and they start having a passionate relationship. What happened in this century over in Europe? Well, there happened to be this little war to end all wars. What did Steichen do? He joined the army, and Europe had these biplanes then. So in the front seat was the pilot with a silk scarf around his neck floating in the back, and in the back seat was Steichen and his men with cameras and frames of film, plates of film, photographing enemy positions. He actually invented aerial reconnaissance. Strand, he opens his business. He starts photographing the less developed, shall we say, areas of New York. He also created a abstract photography. Here's Kaiser, a friendly photograph of a good friend, White, Clarence White. Here's what Quesabar, here's what she thought of marriage and the role of the wife in the marriage. Yoked and muzzled. Her marriage didn't last very long. She had kids, and she was very passionate about raising the kids, but she didn't like being married. Here's one of the last photographs I could find from Stieglitz, because he was so busy running art galleries and printing journals. And the more I look at this, the more I like it. There's just, everything just comes together. I don't know how to describe it other than this really feels, what you got, a bunch of energy leading you to that tall building. Steichen photographed Stieglitz and Strand. That's the building there is the JP Morgan Bank, which is like this massive, powerful, indestructible thing. And here at the end of the day, you've got workers walking by in front of it. The contrast is between the workers and the bank behind them. This is an example of, this is really a beautiful example of Strand's work in the rougher areas of New York, where he was photographing the down and out. And here is just a really touching photograph of a blind woman. He did a tricky thing. He didn't want the people to know that he was photographing them. He wanted to catch them as they really are. So he put a false lens on the front of his camera. Well, he turned his camera sideways, put a false lens on the sides of it, but the real lens was right angles. And so he could walk up and look like he was looking at something in front of him when he was actually photographing the person on his side. One thing I didn't mention about Strand was he was an early pioneer of abstract art, if not the first. And when he showed this to Stieglitz, boy, Stieglitz went crazy, loved it. So here we go to the West Coast. Like I said, Cunningham actually published papers on chemical processes. Lang, when Clarence White was teaching at Columbia, Lang took one of his classes. How cool. Weston is running a studio, doing portraits. He runs into Margaret Mather, who was, of all the women that he had close relationships, they did not get physically involved. But he looks back at his time with her and said she was the most important influence on him. He also started his daybooks. Daybook is published by Aperture and is still available, and I think I already pitched that. The thing I like about Adams here in this period was when he was turned 14, he received a camera. And they had a friend, the family had a friend who was a bit of a geologist, and took Adams to Yosemite for his first trip there. And Adams made his first photographs of Yosemite when he was 14 years old. Oh boy, I wish I could see some of those photographs. I would love it. Okay, Cunningham, look at this. Look at the imagination. Oh my gosh. I just don't know how all that comes out of one person. Just amazing. And I'm still waiting for the others. Okay, the 20s, the roaring 20s. Let's move on. We still have the same five in New York. Steichen loses interest in painting, and you know what he does with his paintings? He burns them. Oh, he becomes the chief photographer of Condé Nast, the fashion photographer, and his salary there was $35,000 a year. In today's money, that is $500,000 a year. He was highly sought after. Quesabayer is starting to age, starting to slow down. Her daughter, one of her daughters, is helping her with the business. And finally, towards the end of the decade, she closes her studio. Alfred Steiger takes one of the most important photographs of his life when he photographs clouds equivalents. I would ask you, how many of you are familiar with Stieglitz's equivalents? He also meets, well, he's met Georgia O'Keeffe, and now he marries her. They ran, we lose white during this dimension. He ran out of galleries, and Strand now is very tight with him, and he raises $1,600 so that Stieglitz can open a gallery. And believe it or not, this tarnishes their reputation. That's a sad thing about Stieglitz. Here's the first equivalent photograph. And the idea is, this is more than a physical photograph of a cloud. This expresses so much more than that. I actually was out in Joshua Tree and during the last Desert Institute class I was teaching, and we had a beautiful sunset. And I started doing equivalents, photographing clouds for the feeling that they created, not just the clouds. It was fun. I recommend that you do that. It just expands the way you see the world. Okay, here's Steichen at his pictorialist best, creating moods and stuff like that. But here's Stieglitz at his fashion best. Gloria Swanson. Steichen, sorry. Strand really has some socialist tendings in his social conscience. And he takes this photograph, and equally important in this photograph is the ship down there in the over right-hand corner with the workers working on it. Strand was a hero for the workers. And on the West Coast, let's see, Cunningham is always refining her style, but Weston sees one of her flower pictures. See, she was confined to her house raising her kids for a long time. So what did she do? She photographed the flowers in her backyard. One of them was on exhibition in Los Angeles when Edward Weston saw it, and he was just blown away. And he immediately wrote her a letter, and they immediately became friends. Let's see, Lang starts going down into the heart of San Francisco to photograph the effects of people that are having affected by the depression. Weston came up when he first started photography. He says, you can't do landscape photography with a camera because it's all chaos. But then he and Brett, his son, spent a long weekend in Mojave Desert and came back. So these are the best negatives I've ever taken. Adams leaves the pictorialist in the rearview mirror, but he makes one of his first most iconic iconic photographs, Monolith, the face of Half Dome. So here's Cunningham's, and there's it. Look at that. Look at that. Doesn't that just hit you? It's so powerful. How did she see that? Then here's her delve into modernism, which focuses on the technology advancements of that age. And this is taken in Signal Hill. Lang does a series of photographs in Arizona, and You talk about intense. Wow. How could you get more intense than this? This is just amazing. Here's Weston's modernist photograph that he did in Ohio. And here is where he starts to focus in on individual objects. Form follows function, displaying the quintessence of something. And so he starts taking back. I apologize for the soft focus. It was a small file that didn't grow up very well. Ansel Adams did pictorialist photography, and here's one example. But this is one of his hallmarks, a monolith, the face of half dome. Interesting thing about that, he had to lug his camera up like several thousand feet to get in a position to do this. And he took about 5 or 6, he made about 5 or 6 negatives. And then he stopped and thought, I really want the sky to be dark. And that was when he was pre-visualizing. The first time he ever pre-visualized what he wanted to do. So he put a red filter on his camera, exposed the negative, and there you have it. So pre-visualization started with Adams and about then. We lost White, so now our New York contingency is down to 4. Stieglitz opens another galaxy. We're going to lose Casebar in this decade, and Stieglitz itself is going to start to decline. Steichen, he kind of went back to his home and started raising delphiniums, and ended up doing a show at MoMA, this work in delphiniums. Strand starts documenting the conditions in the ghettos in town. Here's Steichen's. Steichen was commissioned to take a picture of the Empire State Building, and he actually did 2 negatives and blended them together, and he thought it would look like a maypole. Here's Strand's work. Now this just really intrigues me. It's in a sense it's abstract. It's cohesive. Everything is in balance. It's just I just find it really pleasing to sit back and look at that. And here's a photograph that he took of a statue on the trip to Mexico. In the West Coast. Cunningham meets Martha Graham. Oh, can you imagine the 2 of them together? Martha Graham, the great dancer. The group of Group F64 was founded during that period of time, and Cunningham, Watson, and Adams, of course, were members of it. Lang took 2 really famous photographs during this decade. First was White Angel bread line in San Francisco, where people would go that didn't have food. And the other was Immigrant Mother. That's her most recognized photograph. Mine, actually, my favorite is the White Angel bread line. So intense. I mentioned Group 64. Weston, we've already mentioned, he's starting to take photographs of individual things like shells and stuff like that. What are we going to say about? Yeah, Adams was an advocate. Adams was a Sierra Club member, not a founding member, but a Sierra Club member, and he was an advocate for. The Sierra Club was working on getting Kings Canyon set aside as a national park. Adams provided the photograph for that. No, you can't. My cat wants to sit on my computer here. So Cunningham's works, look what she and Martha Graham did. Just amazing. Oh, I just love it. And here are her parents. Now, Adams said that Cunningham had acetic acid in her veins. She's just said whatever she thought. And you can see where she got that acid. The apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. Whoa, what a wonderful photograph. That is Lang's photograph. Here is the white angel breadline. Look at the hopelessness and the despair. Oh my gosh. How did she do that? Just amazing. And then this is my grandmother, the most recognized photograph from the Depression age. And here's Weston's most famous photograph, Pepper number 30. Weston got accused of being says, I get accused for being a cannibal. Why is that? Well, because I eat my models. Here's the trip out to the Mojave Desert, which got him doing landscapes, brought him back to Oceano and doing along the coast around. And beautiful example of an abstract photograph. I got a few more Weston. This is rock. This is an abstract that he did with the nude. And this one is, I had to put this one in because I camped there. I was backpacking, doing a week-long backpack in the Sierra, and at the end of the second day, about 25 miles in, 25 or 30 miles in, I come up and here's this light and I recognize it immediately. We spent the night there. So this one I put in because it's so different from what Adams does. Look how sharp the driftwood is. And oh, this is just perfection. And the flower itself. Now we get to the 40s. And we lost Quesabar. So now we have just 3 in the East Coast. Strand is actually involved with a group that's providing films for, or photographs for socialist publications. He's got a lot of friends that are communists. He's not communist himself, but he certainly, with his friends, the friends that he keep, he is comes under the watchful watch of the of FBI. He created a film that was never shown in America native land. It is available on the internet if you're curious to see it. Robeson was the narrator on it. If there's a war on, what's Steichen going to do? He's going to join the war effort. First, he starts by putting out an exhibition for MoMA called The Road to Victory. And then he goes to a Navy recruiter and says, hey, I want to join. And hey, how old are you? I'm 63. You don't meet our criterion for age. Yeah, I want to join anyway. And he gets brought on board. And so he starts commanding a group of about 2,000 or 3,000 photographers in the Pacific Theater. Stieglitz his health was degenerating, and in 46 he died. He fell into a coma, had it with a stroke. Cunningham, O'Keefe heard about it. She was living in her beloved New Mexico, Taos area. She heard about it. She came rushing back to New York and was by his side when he died. So here's Steichen's work on the USS Lexington. Great stuff. And here's Strand's work. Again, it's that abstract quality and the simplicity and the balance. And then he does a portrait of a Vermont resident. Pretty cool. Now we talk to the, go back to the West Coast. I forgot, I didn't tell you how Dorothea Lange got out to San Francisco. I got to tell you that because she grew up in Hoboken. And she and a girlfriend of hers decided that they wanted to go around the world. And so they put together a bunch of money and they head off west. And once they get to San Francisco, their money gets stolen and they're stuck there. Okay. Cunningham is still just using her incredible imagination. Lang now is switching from documenting the Depression to documenting the relocation of the Japanese Americans. Now she's working for the federal government. With the Depression, it was for the state. And then she starts traveling worldwide. Weston comes down with signs of Parkinson's disease. And his sons start helping him with his photography more and more. They have to help him more and more. Adams photographs Moonrise over Hernandez. And that was his best-selling system of all. He and Fred Archer developed his own system. And Adams also photographs conditions at Manzanar, but not like Lang does. Okay, look at this imagination. Wow. Cunningham's work, hand weaving. Here's a portrait. Lang's work. Lang became really interested in the effect that World War II had on the status of women. Women were all of a sudden saying, hey, we need you. We need you to build ships. We need you to build tanks. We need you to build airplanes. Rosie the Riveter. And Lang really wanted to emphasize that. Here's women at Richmond at the shipyards lining up for their check. Here's some of the photography she did about relocation of Japanese Americans. And you can see why the federal government wouldn't display this. And then here again, we're back to role of women and argument between a man and a woman, and the woman seems to be getting the better of the man. Weston's work. Who could take a photograph of a mushroom like this except for Edward Weston? There's nobody that could do that. Here's some more of his modernist style. Here's an abstract of a piano. Interesting. Here's his son. This is just hilarious. His son Neil. And this is the last photograph he ever took because he died of Parkinson's. So Adams worked in Yosemite. I have a signed print of this at home. Very exciting. But this is one of his iconic, Clearing Winter Storm in Yosemite. And here's some of the work he did in Mexico, New Mexico, Taos. And of course, Moonrise over Hernandez. He had to print 14,000. He had to print them because not like digital printers. He had to print 1,400 of these. It was his most popular. Yellowstone. I put this in because this uses a special technique to get detail on the highlights and the shadows. A thing called water bath. It was the analog equivalent of HDR. If you're interested in that, I can go into details about that. How that works. Now we're in the 1950s and integration. We lost Stieglitz, so we're just down to Steichen and Strand. McCarthyism is big in the 50s. I think most of us can remember that. And Strand said, you know, there's not enough room in this country for McCarthy and me. And so he leaves America and goes to Paris and spends the rest of his life. He'll go into an area like Egypt, photograph it, live there till he really gets a feeling for what Egypt is all about and publishes a book. So he became quite a book publisher. I didn't want to get back to. Okay. Well, Strand was selected as the photography curator of MoMA. It was very controversial amongst the art photography community. But he put together the most, the greatest exhibition ever in 1955 called The Family of Man. And the first it was mounted in MoMA. And then it went around the world in this incredible book. Oh, it is so moving. And you see the human condition in all sorts of situations. Now it is, now the exhibition is in Amsterdam, It's in Europe, and I have on my bucket list. I want to go see the exhibition in its final resting place in Europe. Strand is photographing the various situations. Look at that. How funny is that? So he's photographing. Here's the Hebrides. Here's some stuff he did in France. How strong these are. And Georges Braque, Pablo Picasso's friend and committer of Cubism crimes. I love Cubism. Here's his work in Italy. This looks like a mafia family. And here's another landscape. And Egypt. On the West Coast, Cunningham keeps on doing her magic. Lang joins staff is brought on to the live staff and travels all over the world with her husband. Weston starts with his son, starts putting together all of his best works. And then in 1958, he dies in a place called Wildcat Hill, which is his domain, his house. Adam starts Aperture magazine. Look at this. Oh, I keep on telling myself I'm going to order a book of Cunningham's painting or photographs. How you just know this person. You're not going to mess with her either. Then you get to do a blind sculptor. Amazing. Here's her self-portrait. Love it. Here's a hand study. Here's Lang's. Look at that. It's showing off there. And what it's like downtown in the Bay Area. And she did some work in Utah. Again, she's doing hands also. They must have been collaborating or conspiring. Ireland, lining up for church, another hand. In court, this one is really guilty, Your Honor. Oh, man. Okay, Weston, here's a picture of Wildcat Hill where he lived, and he loved cats. And so this is just an homage to him. He's gone already, but this is just an homage to him. Adam's works, I love this abstract. I love this one. Actually, this is the abstract I like, and this is kind of traditional Adams. Now we're in the 60s, and we lost Weston, so we still have Steichen and Strand. Strand is doing his things, traveling around, writing books. And Steichen receives the Presidential Medal of Honor from Lyndon Johnson. Okay. Steichen's still photographing, is very, and Strand does work here in Monaco. Oh, we're nearly done. I kind of zoom through these. Look at the contrast here for Ghana. Cunningham. Here, let's get to the work. Again, Cunningham is just amazing. And there's Man Ray, another one of the great photographers. Look at, she just can't miss, can she? And hands with the dream walking. Cunningham just can't miss. Lang, work in Egypt. Adams. I have this photograph too, signed. Pretty. I like put this one in because it shows you can do a sunset without color. Okay, 70s, we lost Lang, and we're going to use Steichen and Strand. Here's some of Strand's work. Again, it's got that abstract quality to it. Cunningham. Cunningham is in her 90s now, and she writes a book called After 90. She writes that in 75, and then a year later she dies. So it's only published posthumously. I'd like to get my hands on both of those books. I have to remember to look. Adams is Jimmy Carter, president, requests Adams to come and do the official. They do official painting. He did the first official photograph, color too. More of Cunningham's work. And Adams' photograph of Jimmy Carter. Okay, now we're in 1980. And we lose everyone except Adams. Adams received the Presidential Medal of Honor also from Jimmy Carter, and he died of heart disease in '84. So we're almost done here. Here's the legacy of these people. So in their own words, Case of Buyer, I am now a mother and a grandmother. My children and their children have been my closest thought. But from the first day of dawning individuality, I have longed, especially unceasingly, to make pictures of people, to make likenesses that are biographies, to bring out in each photograph the essential temperament that is called soul, humanity. Boy, it really gets into what she was looking for and the amazing talent she had to actually accomplish all that. Stieglitz. It is not art in the professionalized sense about which I care, but that which is created sacredly as a result of a deep inner experience with all of oneself, and that becomes art in time. Here's White. I think the greatest weakness of the young worker is the lack of something to express. He is too much interested in the photograph for the sake of the photograph alone. That is, in the medium or in the taking of the photograph itself. The photograph should express something. Hear, hear. Steichen. When I first became interested in photography, I thought it was the whole cheese. My idea was to have it recognized as one of the fine arts. Today, I don't give a hoot in hell about it. The mission of photography is to explain man to man and each man to himself. And that is no mean function. Yeah. I had to use an Eisenstadt picture, but I couldn't resist it. This is so funny. Paul Strand, I photographed these people. These are people down in the ghettos of New York, because I felt that they were all people whom life had battered into some sort of extraordinary interest and, in a way, nobility. He really cared about that last. Oh, look at that. Cunningham, oh, I love this. A woman said to me when she first sat down, "You're photographing the wrong side of my face." I said, "Oh, is there one?" I don't talk about success. I don't know what it is. Wait till I'm dead. Lang, so often, so often it's just sticking around and being there. Mind remaining there, not swooping out in a cloud of dust, sitting down on the ground with people, letting children look at your camera with their dirty, grimy little hands and putting their fingers on the lens. And you just let them, because you know that if you will be in a generous manner, you are apt to receive it. Weston, one does not think during creative work any more than one thinks when driving a car. Yeah, but one has a background of years, learning, unlearning, success, failure, dreaming, thinking, experience, all of this. Then the moment of creation, the focusing of all into the moment. So I can take without thought 15 carefully considered negatives, one every 15 minutes, given material with as many possibilities. But there is all the eyes have seen in this life to influence me. One of the things that's very important to me is how our experiences start accumulating and affect what we our growth. And Adams, finally, I try to keep both arts alive, a concert pianist and landscape photographer. But the camera one, I found that while the camera does not express the soul, perhaps the photograph can. So the final thoughts, these are very, very inspirational. Their works and their words are very inspirational. And hopefully that you got some ideas of things that you can try on your own. I'm going to put together a handout for this. Um, I mentioned the blog posts and all of the blog posts I have. Um, you can also sign up for my newsletter. But the handout that I plan to put together for this, because there's a lot of information that we cover, is you'll need to send me your email address and I'll get it out to you. I'll be putting together the 2023 workshop schedule. I'm still working on that. But join me with the workshop. Oh, I was supposed to be covered up. That's this year. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you again. I really enjoy the Redlands Camera Club, and I wish you all the very best and beautiful light. That's it.
Ralph, what an amazing trip down history.
Tonight to share an evening with you. So yeah, I get involved with the competitions and have done a few presentations and always enjoy. I really enjoy getting when you have your in-person meetings and just seeing my friends and catching up with them. But I also appreciate the way you are taking a safe path through this COVID nightmare, and by having the Zoom meetings like this, which are much safer. So anyway, I do workshops. I've been teaching for the Desert Institute for gosh, I don't know how many years. Do workshops. I've sold a few pictures here and there, and writing a book. Yeah. I'm debating the title of the book. First of all, it was Mastering Landscape Photography, but that's too bland. And now I'm thinking about creating expressive landscape photographs, but I got feedback from a friend said I wouldn't even bother looking at that book. So maybe it's Mastering Landscape Photography hyphen creating expressive photographs. Maybe that's the title. I don't know. I'll keep working on it. Anyway, I'm up to almost 300. Well, I'm up to over 270 pages right now. And it's fun. So tonight, does anyone have any questions? I'll be getting my 2003 workshop schedule up on my website fairly soon. I'm distracted with other things right now. Anyway,